welcome again our listeners. So thanks for tuning in. My name is Shreya Srivastava and I will be the host for the podcast. A little background about myself before I start off. So I currently work as a customer success manager with Whatfix. And I have been fortunate enough to have got a chance to work with the different enterprises, interact with the people from different regions. And I think I have been closely working with the leaders across the globe from our HR, L&D, and sales space. So I think I've been lucky enough there. And my work typically would be to kind of strategize the business outcomes and help customers get the ROI. So I think that was pretty much about myself. Not to steal the show away from a main speaker, we have a very interesting topic today with extremely talented guests. Now, we are going to discuss about the COVID-19 impact, remote work, and digitally mediated communication. We thought about this topic and the guest, we couldn't have thought anyone better, who has a vast knowledge about literature and of course about the digital learning communication. Not to really keep you guys waiting, I would like to call upon Robert, and let's say for the main man himself. So Robert, over to you. I would like you to kind of introduce yourself to the audience before we kickstart.
Sure, of course. So my name is Robert Szabo. I'm a South African by birth. I live in Bergisch Gladbach, which is near Cologne in Germany. My background is in adult education with a focus on applied linguistics, so language acquisition. And I work at a company called Learnship, and we do corporate training for business communication and intercultural skills. That
was super exciting. Thank you so much, Robert. I believe that it's like there is a lot to learn from you. And the topic for today is really interesting. So it's something like top 3 hacks to transform your organization's learning experience. And it's none other than Robert who's going to talk about those hacks. And I have few questions for him. So before we go into detail, let's start like just setting the base right. So let's start with the basics and clean up the air. So Robert, I have a question for you. So could you please tell me some of the tips that you would like to share for the younger souls who have recently joined the industry in L&D space? I know a bit tricky one, but then I think that will include the majority of people who are there.
Yeah, well, I think the most important one is obviously to keep up with the technological development, which is really moving at a more rapid pace than it ever has. Yeah. And I think, you mentioned the COVID pandemic, but I mean, that had a big impact. You've got a lot of people now working in remote teams. They may never have met each other physically. Young people need to be aware that the skills that are required by employers these days are changing. Mm-hmm. And communication skills are just really, really important to be effective in this new way of work. So I think, to be aware of the technology and to be aware of their own strengths and weaknesses in terms of skills.
That was really insightful. I think I have a lot for you. And for the younger souls, I think that's something even I have struggled during my initial space when I came into the corporate. And I'm pretty sure in the learning and development space, we definitely have a lot to hear from you. Moving on, I have one more question for you. So I see you often talking about the different topics every week on LinkedIn, and one such kind of caught my attention. So you referred about how people often have difficulty in learning. So it just amused me the most when you related to gamification. So that's exciting. So can you share any of the real-time examples on what helped a company kind of transform its employees for the learning experience? You can share your experience.
Yeah, of course. That video, what I was talking about there, is that sometimes people believe when they're designing courses for corporate learners that they should make things very, very easy so that people stay engaged, because they think that people just want to collect the points or whatever it is through that sort of shallow, what I would call a shallow gamification, which is a bit like your cell phone buzzing and getting little Candy Crush points, and trying to apply that mechanism to serious learning. And what I argue in that video is that's not the way I would do it. And I refer to a computer game that was released this year called Elden Ring by a Japanese studio, FromSoft. And that is a really difficult game. It's incredibly difficult. You die all the time. You have to keep doing the levels. But it's really popular. And what I was talking about is appealing to learners as adults, as intelligent people, creating a set of challenges for them and engaging them in the sense of laying down the gauntlet and saying, look, this is tough, but this is meaningful. And for me, as a course designer, that is the way to go. So, that's what I was talking about.
That was really exciting. And I was very curious when I was reading that and I was hearing to, whatever video you added. And I was like, that's super exciting. So I think that was very much I had from a very high level. Now I have some more questions for you and let's get deeper into our conversation. So I know that you wrote a journal lately, right? And I think during the COVID, you had a lot of things that you published across. So again, coming back to the COVID, so how do you feel COVID had a bigger impact in changing the mindset of the people learning in a traditional way? Because I think everyone, including me, I think we were so much used to going to office, and even if I talk about the college grads, right, they were very much going to the college, having those in classroom trainings, whatever was given. So what were the key challenges you discovered when you wrote this particular journal?
Yeah, well, that was a massive shock for the world. Wherever you lived, whether you're in India, South Africa, and Europe, Asia, it was a truly global shock, and it happened relatively without warning. In that particular paper that you refer to, I was talking about the impact of the pandemic on the corporate learning and development industry, and I compare it in the paper to as big a historical event as the Second World War and women joining the workforce, for example.
Yeah.
So there are sometimes these things that happen to humanity that create changes that don't go away. And I think the impact of COVID-19 is visible in the sense that I think remote work's not going anywhere now. So I think it became anchored as a viable way of doing things for companies. And in fact, you hear about companies now reducing office space. They're actually enforcing remote work policies in certain cases because they're controlling costs. Because the way that cities had been planned, right, meant that the real estate costs were enormous for city center office space. So there's all these sort of knock-on effects. But that was one point that I made in the paper, is that you get these historical events. They result in anchoring certain phenomena which don't go away. That was the first one. I think with regard to learning, it was proved that remote learning works. And it was a huge debate, obviously. And what you find is that there are different opinions. So I know that in the higher education space, most teachers want to go back to the on-site traditional model because they know it. But many of the learners want a hybrid approach now.
Yeah.
So you've got a different generation developing its own view of what they think the future should be. And of course, these people will be the decision makers and managers going forward. If they're 25 now, they will be 35, 45 going forward. And that will be the shape of things. So I think this digital pedagogy got a big shot in the arm. And on LinkedIn, I'm quite active there. And I follow a lot of people who are involved in the digital transformation of universities programs. And there are more and more jobs and more serious jobs, strategic jobs being created in that space. So digital curriculum creation and the digital transformation of university offerings. So I think that's not going anywhere. And this is directly attributable to the pandemic.
That was really great to hear from you, Robert, because I think even when we started off with the work from home, we all were skeptical, right? How we are going to actually cope up not going to office. And it was also a lot to do with the trust, right? How would a manager's trust be working? So when I actually went through your journal, I was really impressed how nicely you articulated things, and it was really, really insightful.
Thank you.
Okay, so moving on. So again, I think communication has been one of the major aspects when you talk about, right? So when you talk about communication, how would you cope up learning and facilitate the communication between two people in the organization who doesn't have any languages in common? And I think I also categorize myself in that place because I also am someone who doesn't know a lot of languages, right? So how would you facilitate communication between those two people who have nothing in common, no languages in common, and still you would like to derive an effective interaction or communication out of that, right? So let's say they're working from two different regions across the globe. So how would you do that, and what are your tips and tricks for facilitating communication between the two? Yeah.
No, I mean, that's an excellent question. Fortunately, it doesn't happen very often that there's no language in common at all.
Yeah.
What we have seen increasingly is that English has become something of a lingua franca. It's become something where, if a Japanese guy is talking to a Swedish person, they're going to be speaking English. Neither is speaking in their first language. But what we see around the world now is a developing competence to do even quite technical and specialized work in English, just using English as an instrument. And this is the way I see it now. there are two kinds of motivation in language learning. There's the instrumental and the integrative. In the past, right, when you had a world of empire and you had the British, soldiers everywhere in the world, and the churches and the administrative infrastructure in places like India and South Africa, and English was spread in this. It was almost used as a integrative tool where people wanted to become part of that community. They would learn English because they wanted to rise maybe in medicine or law by becoming part of the Commonwealth or something like this. But I think that's changed. And I think we're in this post-colonial space now, which is interesting, where certainly in Germany, and I've seen it around the world, where English is just a tool like any other tool. So just like learning PowerPoint or learning Excel, English is just a tool to get stuff done in the world. So to answer your question, what I would do is establish a kind of benchmark level. And whether that's A2 or B1, so a sort of a pre-intermediate or an intermediate level, just a basis level. And then I would try and bring everybody up to that baseline, right? And then the next thing to do is basically address the communication goals and have some do's and don'ts and rules around how we communicate. Look at the different channels that are being used, and bring in a culture where everybody has a voice, right? So that they all have a sort of benchmark level of this language, which could be neutral in value, but just as a tool, and then to try and encourage that. And this is something I've done at Learnship. It's something I've done before, and it's part of my job is to consult HR people with exactly that headache. I mean, one classic example is when people outsource engineering to India, for example. And you'll find in many of those cases that the Indian developers actually have better English than the companies who are outsourcing the work. But they're different. They work differently. They have different senses of how to run projects, how to communicate. So a lot of that soft, intangible sort of stuff is really affecting the bottom line and the dollars and cents. And that's where you have to get involved and find out through, mass assessment, for example. You just check where everybody is, establish a benchmark, establish a program, get everybody up to the same level, and then you can go from there.
Thank you so much for that, Robert, because I think upskilling is really important. You spoke about upskilling, right? So I think we need to understand what is that works well. We need to start from the base, and that's where we can have this going. So this is something personally I have battled a lot. But then I think that's something I'm trying to learn, especially wherein I stay, right? In India, you would have multiple languages. So that's the reason I was really curious to know, how do you actually handle things? So really impressed.
Well, what I've seen in India myself is that English gets used, right? So if you have guys from the north of India and they're working in the south, so there may not be a common language. The guy may be a Hindu speaker, the other one's a Tamil. And you have other guys from other regions with other languages. And it's a kind of English that develops, and it uses some words from other languages, but people solve the problem. I think as a communication consultant, it's to establish exactly what's going on there, and then to use the strengths of the group, to solve the puzzle of the international communication.
That's super good to hear, and I'm sure that now everyone is very much communicative, and English is like a language, go-to language for everyone. So I hope that we have this communication even expand. I think it's very much onto the Europe region that I've seen certain challenges wherein you would not even get to hear English. So that's where I have faced challenges in my past, but then I'm really excited by whatever use you have on the languages and communication. That's something really different.
Yeah, I mean, even in places like Brazil and China, because if you go back 20, 30 years, you do see a world where there's a lot of people who are absolute beginners who have never used English or anything, but that world is disappearing because of government policies in primary education. So I think you've got a situation now where many high school graduates are coming out with sort of a pre-intermediate level. So it's a different world that we live with now.
That's definitely true. Thank you so much for that, Robert. Now, okay, so coming back to like a final question that I have from my side, right? And that's personally very close to me. So I'm bound to ask you that question. Now that you're from South Africa, okay? Being a cricket fan, I believe everyone would be a cricket fan. So in India, people are literally crazy, and I'm pretty sure that because you're from South Africa, that's something which is definitely going to be there in the plant. And of course, you must have played cricket in your childhood. I'm not sure if that's true, but I believe,
yes, no, absolutely. So I was educated in South Africa, and I played cricket in the street with the guys in my neighborhood. I played for my school. I think I was the captain of the under-10 B team. I remember it was a very proud moment in my cricket career. But yeah, I love the game. And I grew up attending 5-day test matches at St. George's Park. Saw some of the greats. I saw Brian Lara, Sachin Tendulkar, Curtly Ambrose, these guys. Shane Warne. And somewhere I have a little book with their autographs in. So yeah, no, I love cricket very much. I miss it because in Germany, obviously, it's not a major sport. Mm-hmm. I still follow, on the live ticker and just when there are matches on. But great game.
Okay, so I have one question for that. Okay, so that's something just trying to link it with what you do currently. So what's that one thing you feel is important for communicating well amongst the team members in the organization, right? When we talk about the corporate and in the cricket team. So if I have to say it, it's on and off the field. So how do you feel that the communication is different? And maybe what's that you see in common between these two things?
Yeah, I think that there are a lot of parallels between sport and business success. I think that within a team, mm-hmm. the roles and responsibilities have to be very, very clear. And I think that's very similar within a cricket team. So you don't need the fielders challenging the captain's decision about whether to come in, and or to fall back a few meters, or when to rotate bowlers and things like that. So I think there's got to be a balance between people giving input and having feedback from the team, because there are certain good perspectives that you can gain from asking people. But at the end of the day, you have to have a cohesive unit. So I think that the roles, responsibilities, and the respect for structure. That's something that ties together good sport teams and good business teams.
You spoke so well about this, Robert, because I feel whenever even we do something good together as a team, right? So it's always said that we were a good sport. So I think it has a lot to do with the cricket or in general, any sport, right? I think the team bonding is something it has got a very bigger role, even in the organization and everywhere.
So if you have a couple of superstars, but their behavior is bad and they're toxic, it can sink the performance of the entire team. So I'm, South African, maybe a little old school in that regard, but I don't like that behavior. And I like my team to be kind of just humble, modest, and to work for each other. And I think that requires strong communication. In my team at Learnship, actually, I've got something like 11 cultures. I have people from Russia, from China, from Brazil. We've got people from Portugal, Spain, Germany, Ireland, really from all over. And the way I deal with that is to say, look, we have our own culture here in the team. And we spoke explicitly about it. We put our values down on paper and we try and live according to them. We have open discussions. Everybody's allowed to speak. But at the end of the day, the person who carries the responsibility makes the call. And that's how we go about it. But I see it very much like leading a sports team.
Yeah, that's brilliant and super good to hear from you. Someone who has played cricket in the childhood, I am pretty sure you are now well versed with how team works in corporate as well as in the cricket. So, okay, so with that, we are actually moving to our final segment of the podcast. And that's my personal favorite. That's the rapid fire round. Okay, so here you are caught. So you can brace yourself before I'm going to ask you the first question. Since you love cricket so much, and I think that's something we have this very much in common, and I'm sure that all the listeners would also love to hear this one. So who is your favorite cricketer and why?
Yeah, I think of the current players, there's a guy who plays for South Africa called Quinton de Kock.
Yeah.
And I like this guy. He basically, he's positive. He's assertive. He takes risks. And I think he lifts the people around him. And he's obviously just a great cricketer. So great eye, very fast reactions. And he's innovative. He does things which are surprising. And I like to watch him. Yeah.
Even I love watching him. And I think when I talk about cricketers, there have been few cricketers I have always loved and even have watched since my childhood. I love A.B. de Villiers as well. And it's so great to see, how he's so calm, yet he just finishes his job and it's just like he alone kind of battles with one of the teams. So it's
he was, I mean, probably the most naturally talented sportsman I've seen in my life. So the sense of timing, and with a guy like that, he looks like he has more time than everybody else.
Yeah, and he'll do so smoothly.
Yeah. No, very impressive. And he's obviously retired, or he's not playing the international game now, but I think we'll miss him.
Yeah, absolutely. I think all of our Indian fans would also agree with AB de Villiers. And of course, Quinton de Kock is something we always love watching. So that's on. So moving on to the second question. So since you were a teacher and before joining the corporate, so if given a chance, what would you like to teach the young souls?
I think it's going to sound very boring and old-fashioned, but I think certain things are worthwhile, even if they're not easy. And we live in a world now where everything is kind of relevant for 2 minutes or 1 minute, and people's attention spans are getting shorter, and people don't read books anymore, and they won't watch a video if it's more than 2 minutes. And I think my advice to young people is to try and recover some of that discipline and rigor that the previous generations had, because they're going to need it. And I think that's my message. I have 2 children, and I try to bring them up in this way. Because I think the world is very much driven on this shallow form of engagement I spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
You know, you get rewards, little lights come on, and you get some kind of a digital picture of something. But they're very shallow rewards. And I think the deep rewards come from hard work. And that's my advice for you. That
was super good. And even when I see the young generation, right, even my brother, when I look through, right, I feel things have changed a lot, right? So not just about generation, but if I look like 4 years back, how things were when we joined, right? And now when I look things, so it has definitely changed a lot. And I think we need to really go back to the basics, like you mentioned, and actually inculcate some of those qualities over again. So
I think
that's a very nice point.
We need to be resilient. And, you know, there's war in the world and pandemics, and the technological change is fast. And humans are experiencing psychological strain, and they need to be tough now, and you need to have midterm and longer term goals, and to hold together with your community and group. And these are old strengths, old things that, you know, we've forgotten, but we need.
Absolutely. Cannot agree more in that aspect. Okay, so I have one more question for you. So what's the most funniest moment that you remember from your childhood? Now, this is going to be interesting, because I see you as a very learned, and, you know, like all things in certain pattern. Now, I would really love to know that funny moment of yours from your childhood.
There's a story that my mother tells when people are there, and it's always embarrassing for me, but I'll tell you about it anyway. So when I grew up, I was born in South Africa, but we moved to England. My dad got a job in Birmingham, and we moved as a family, and we were living in this farmhouse. We didn't have a house yet. We just got there. And apparently I had gone to the fridge, and I must have been 4 years old, and I'd eaten this whole block of butter for some reason. I don't know. And so they found me, and the sort of empty butter thing is like next to me, and there's like butter on my face and stuff. So obviously me, right? And they asked me who did it, and I'm like, no idea. And then I said, no, I think I know. Yeah, there was this mouse, right? And he's gone now, so you'll never see him. But that's what it was. And so my mom tells the story quite often, and So.
And that brings me to that curiosity. So you still have butter, or that was the only last time you had butter from your fridge?
I don't even like it that much. I don't know what happened. I think I must have just got like, that's something about my personality. Maybe I've started doing it, and I just kept going until it was finished, kind of thing. And I suppose that's what happened. And hadn't realized like how insane the situation was until the end. But that's a small child Rob story for you.
This is really hilarious, and I mean that's really funny to hear from you, and to hear from you actually. I think you sharing a childhood story anyhow is exciting because you come with so much, like so much discipline. So I was really keen to know this from you.
Not at 4 years old. Yeah.
Okay, so coming to our last question that I have for you in the rapid fire round. So what do you like to read the most? And again, this is again tricky because I know you write a lot. So what is that you like to read the most? I'm pretty sure each one of our listeners would be keen to know.
So I have different interests. It's my bookshelf, or one of the bookshelves behind me, but I love science fiction. right? So I really enjoy science fiction. I also enjoy spy novels, so John le Carré and that sort of stuff. I'm really interested. I like geopolitical analysis, so I'm fascinated by that. So science fiction, geopolitical analysis, spy fiction. And then, like obviously I read about management, business, and applied linguistics and those sorts of things, but that's more like work reading. But if it's just for myself, actually what I'm reading right now is the Witcher books by Sapkowski. I don't know if you know The Witcher. Geralt of Rivia? No?
I am really bad at reading. I think you are actually giving me that motivation that I should sit with a book. So
but there's a Netflix series, and it's quite good, yeah? So The Witcher is basically a series. It's a book series written by a Polish writer. It's based on Slavic fairy tales, right, from the East. And it's quite dark and really quite well written. And they made a very good Netflix series. I think they've made two seasons now so far. But I'm reading the books at the moment.
Okay, now I'm going to read that. And so that the next time when we interact, I definitely have something to answer when you question me this.
Okay.
But that's great to hear from you. And I think this brings us to the end of the yet another episode of Digital Adoption Show. Thank you so much, Robert, for doing it. Like, it has been amazing hosting you. But before we close off, I'm pretty sure that our listeners would have a lot of questions for you. And even after listening to this podcast, right? So could you please let us know how they can reach out to you in case they have any more questions from this podcast?
Yes, of course. So, I think LinkedIn is probably the best. It's the social media channel that I use the most. So I'm Robert Szabo. I'm the VP Learning Sciences at Learnship. You can find me through the search function on LinkedIn. You can send me a direct message. I will answer. And if you send me an invitation to connect, I will connect. And it's always nice basically to have these conversations about what I do, because I really enjoy it, and I don't ever turn away an opportunity to have those discussions. So that's probably the best.
Thank you so much, Robert. Thank you so much for telling. I'm going to be the first person to spam your LinkedIn now with a lot of questions.
Cool.
But truly, it has been a pleasure listening to you. I think all of our listeners would also agree, because it was really exciting. We had cricket, we had literature, we had everything combined. And also thank you to everyone who was listening to the podcast. And stay tuned to the Digital Adoption Show for more content and some really incredible speakers like we had Robert today. So I think that's all I had from my side, and have a great one, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Shreya.